genre.
Okay, I did not see any of that coming, any of that. Welcome to Beyond Geek By Night, where we've been discussing each episode of the Geek By Night podcast leading up to the series finale. On today's show, we will be discussing the 32nd episode, Genius Boy. So stock up on Kleenex because we're all tired of using coffee filters. We're about to go Beyond Geek By Night. I am your host, Matt Bennett. And here is our awesome panel. I'm joined today by writer and creator Scott Carelli.
Hi.
Writer and executive producer Nick Jimenez.
Hello.
Voice of Mindy Gibson, Morgan Spencer.
Hey.
And director of this episode, as well as voice of Gwen Allen, Ray Ruzzo.
Hello.
In this episode, Genius Boy, we begin with Mindy investigating the monorail incident. She soon finds out that the Devil's Advocates carried it out under the instruction of someone by the username Genius Boy. She grows suspicious of Simon as the team meets with Leo Dobbs, the publicist, and they adopt their new public superhero identities. Meanwhile, Max Carmichael is ousted by his former peppermint patty, Billy. After getting a pep talk from his mom, Max decides to bravely pursue forgiveness. Billy celebrates as the verdict comes down on Lorelei Swift. Guilty. Not only is she going to prison, she'll be held in the very cells that she designed, and Billy gets the last word in their feud as she is locked away. Back at Underdog Comics, the gang is stunned after watching their friend taken away to prison. Just then, Max Carmichael arrives and declares that he wants to join the Underdogs in their struggle against Dr. William Medina.
Well done, as always.
This was a really, really great episode. You know, last week when we were talking about the plans for season 2 and seeing that arc and how there's just kind of so much that happens each episode, I think we're really feeling that for this. You know, there's so many storylines between, you know, catching up with Max for the first time this season, all the way to everything that happens with Simon, which I'm sure we will dive deep into. So I got to ask about our big return in this episode of Max Carmichael. So for Nick and Scott, why did you wait until the second episode to bring Max in?
That was a decision by me that happened in post, actually, because these two episodes were originally one script. They were the premiere, and it was way too long, and so we chopped it in half. And at first, the scene with Max in Monopoly Comics was in the previous episode, and it just felt weird to have like just one Max scene. And we realized that if we moved it to the second episode, it would give him a little bit of an arc leading up to him declaring that he wants to be an underdog. And so we just think that for pacing reasons and just for story flow, it worked better in Genius Boy than it did than having this scene split up across the two episodes.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's good to have Max back, and you know, one of the big scenes that we see him in is the conversation between him and his mom, who we are introduced to in this episode. So my question for Ray, who directed this episode, is what was it like directing a character like Max's mom, who we don't know yet and is very integral to the story, and you kind of have to introduce them at the same time as carrying out this scene?
I absolutely loved directing Max's mom. She was so colorful and delightful and just like so different from everything. I don't know. I was delighted by her. Part of it was just like considering, like, okay, what kind of woman would raise the boy who grows up to be Max? And just sort of taking into account, like, definitely this sort of like over coddling.
The beans and weenies.
Doting, for sure. Very doting mother.
Oh, yes.
He can do no wrong, and when he does go wrong, it's okay. You know? He never...
pad.
Very embarrassed. Oh my god. And he didn't find out what that meant until last Christmas.
Oh my god.
That's one of the funniest jokes Nick's ever written.
Yeah, it's so
I
good.
love it.
It's
And
so good.
I consistently think that it was yours. Because I'm always like, oh yeah, that was a really good joke of Scott's.
Yeah, no, you wrote it, but you wrote it in like, because this we've been writing a version of this scene for like 3 years now.
Mm-hmm.
Really?
Yeah. Because we
this was going to be in like Another Life, and like every iteration of the finale, there was always, or premiere, this was always going to be like a big scene, was him meeting his mom and having his like down on his dumps moment.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so every time we've written that scene, Nick has put that joke in, or he put it in the first time, and then I've carried it through to each draft. But it's been so long that he just keeps forgetting that he's the one that wrote it. But he definitely did.
But yeah, I just wanted to like have this scene that felt very like loving, but at the same time completely dysfunctional.
Because it's kind of inspiring, the little speech we get, but that's true. It kind of has to be a certain type of person.
You just hear all these snippets about his family, and you know, one of them can't drive for another year, and just like all these like strange little things that just make you go like, what happened to him growing up? Where did this guy come from?
Scott and Nick, where did the concept of Max's mom come from? Is this, do you kind of have the starting point of Max, or were you really trying to think of like this, this new character from the ground up?
Well, there was a line last season where Billy was explaining the origin of the Max Carmichael that we know, where he said that he was kind of like a loser living with his mother. And so we knew that when Max was down on his dumps, he would return home to his mother at some point. And then we just thought, well, what kind of mother would raise someone who would turn into Max? And I was like, and I think I came up with the idea that she would be like a Jewish or Italian like mother from like New York, and just like very doting, very like, oh, don't worry, you could never do anything wrong, my angel, that kind of vibe. And I think I recently seen the movie The Meddler, and is that Susan Sarandon in that?
Yes.
Yeah. Susan Sarandon plays a character that's very similar to Max Carmichael's
East
mom.
Coast doting mother.
Yeah. Overbearing a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But Max doesn't seem to mind versus the character in that movie. But yeah.
And it kind of, like Max is a character who likes things the easy way, and or is kind of not used to things being hard or taking a lot of effort. And we can kind of see that that's, been for better or worse. His upbringing is that he hasn't really had like a lot of challenge and strife even before the superpowers. And yeah, and I think we always had a lot of fun writing. Anytime we kind of get to write a character who has a really different speech or worldview as the underdogs, it's always like a lot of fun perspective.
Yeah, so let's shift gears a little bit and talk about Mindy. She's had 2 very big episodes here, and I definitely want to hear from Morgan about Mindy's story in these last 2 episodes and what it's going to be like the rest of the season. But I got to ask you first, Morgan, what did you think when you were reading the big reveal at the end of the episode about Simon and him using this double and being sick? And we kind of led up to it for a couple episodes, but when it finally happened, I remember just like looking over at Chelsea next to me with my mouth hanging open because I couldn't believe it.
Yeah, my like heart dropped to my butt. Like it was just I love Simon Mindy loves Simon so much.
Definitely not you, just Mindy. Just Mindy.
Morgan also loves Simon so much. It's like scary, and she's already freaked out, It's just like already like what's going on? And then at the end, whenever you figure out of this episode, I guess I should say, whenever the big reveal happens of Robot Simon and Wheelchair Simon, like that's scary and devastating, and like what the hell is going on, So I don't know, just same, Matt, like jaw dropping, just what like what next? Like, all right, way to just throw it at me like that. I had no idea that was coming when I had first read it, like had no clue that was going to be a thing. So that's what's so cool about it.
How do you feel about Mindy's arc this season? As we're recording this now, you've read and recorded at least a few episodes ahead of where we are. So you've got some more information than we do. But how do you feel about where she's going here at the end of the series?
I love it. I feel like she's like growing. She's growing so much, as she should be. She, I think, is really finding herself. I think she really struggled with like not knowing where she fit in or who she was. And I think she's finally like finding her groove and her place in the world and having a lot of confidence like within herself and who she is. And I'm just so happy for her. It feels so good. It feels like she's in the right place at all times. I don't know. She's really trying to do the right thing. I don't know. I love her. She's so cool. She's so cool. Like, I wish I could be as cool as Mindy. It's so fun to voice Mindy because I'm like, dang, like, I wish I could be this cool. I'm not this cool. How does she get to be this cool? Oh, yeah, because Scott and Nick wrote her. That's why.
Another thing we got with Mindy in this episode is we now have the name of her superhero identity in Sucker Punch. What do you think about the name, now that that's the big reveal?
I actually don't hate it. I love it. It's so fun. I think all the names are super great. I love her name. It's so fun. It's so fitting.
Yeah, I really love the names that got chosen. Just to go through the list here, Gibson is Hypersense. Gretchen is Time Zone. Simon is IQ. And Mindy is obviously Sucker Punch. Elliot is Mood Board. And Gwen is Sublet. So Scott and Nick, how long have you had these names in your head?
It varies. So I think IQ may be the oldest.
I think that's the only OG name.
IQ is an OG name that Scott just had. Like, it's perfect.
Right. The original Elliot was a chick magnet, which is where that joke comes from. And original Gwen was marionette, and the joke there was that it doesn't make any sense because she would be the puppeteer, not the puppet. And I forget who else. Oh,
Gibson's always the trickiest.
Yeah, Gibson's was sensory overload. Yeah. So they were a little like cheesier and cheekier in the other version, and so I wanted to take it a little more seriously this time. Mindy never had a name. That was the joke. She knew what her name was, but she never told anybody.
Like Jean Grey.
Yeah. And well, she's Marvel Girl. Everyone knows that.
Everyone calls her that.
Everyone calls her Marvel Girl. Yeah. So that's so it was nice to revisit everybody and come up with their names again. I was especially proud of Gwen's name, which took the longest, I think, to figure out because her powers are so specific. And I wanted one that actually made sense with her powers. So, Sublet.
Her power set is like truly unique. It's definitely not one you see it ever.
It almost works better in the audio format to hear like the duplicated voices with Gwen's powers than, it's almost like it wouldn't even work in another medium.
We hope so. One of my favorite scenes in this whole episode is Gwen trying to like describe her powers to the crowd of people and just bombing. Ray is just so amazing in that scene, and just with the effect of the microphone, just because you can imagine the townspeople like, what is she talking about?
Oh my god,
that's horrifying.
She can do what?
So Ray really pulling double duty with this episode, being Gwen, the leader of the underdogs, and then as well as directing. What was the most challenging section of this episode to direct? We talk a lot about how fun it is to direct and the process and things like that. I'm just generally curious about what the most challenging part is, because as a listener, I don't think about that as much. It just blends all together, and I assume that some parts are way more behind the scenes than we think.
The really, really big group scenes are probably the most challenging. When it's two characters just talking to each other, I'm just working with 2 tracks, and I can switch back and forth really easily when I'm listening to each of the takes and deciding which one I'm going to use. But when you have 7, 8, 9 people in a scene, it becomes a real like balancing act, and it's very time consuming, but very rewarding. And this episode, it was definitely all the scenes in Leo's office were the challenge.
Oh yeah,
he is so fun. That character is fun.
I was bursting out laughing like every
Same.
time he is so good.
Yeah,
perfect.
Billy McCartney rules.
Yeah,
he really does.
Like his partner's an astronaut who's in space, and I just love it.
yeah. We're not sure he's real.
I need to know, is the husband real? Is the husband real? I don't...
Yeah, we're not sure. Jury's still out on that one.
Believe both ways. So I think we got to come and talk about the big plot twist here at the end of the episode with Simon revealing that not only has he been using a robot Simon, he is wheelchair bound and is dying. I've not listened to any of the previous episodes after listening to this one because we're really trying to catch these when they're fresh. Are there clues to this previously in the series? Like, if I go back, am I going to are some things going to make sense now?
It kind of starts at if you go back and watch the Christmas episode or listen to the Christmas episode.
Well, it goes back further than that because it starts in Friends and Enemies when Simon wakes up in the morning and Atlas tells him that if he keeps going at the rate that he's going,
right,
like his body is deteriorating. So that's sort of the first hint of it coming.
I'm just worried about Simon, so I want to get some more information and be consoled about this.
He just doesn't know when to switch off.
It's true.
He goes to ham all the time.
Mm-hmm.
For those listening on the podcast feed, we are actually recording this Beyond Geek by Night episode live, and we are planning on doing so for the rest of the season, which means that we have the opportunity to ask questions from people in the Discord or Patreon subscribers or anything like that, and just be a little more interactive. So we have a question from Chelsea Kern, who is the voice of Gretchen West, as well as a director and casting director. And she says, this is for everybody. What has been your favorite episode so far?
The new normal for me.
Because you got to stop a train?
It was just so badass. Like, yes, it was just it felt so powerful.
To really use your powers.
Yeah, it felt powerful for me. And it just felt so fun to, be back at it with everybody. And I don't know, it was just so fun. I literally had the best time. I can't tell you how good of a time I had in my childhood closet, just recording by myself for hours. It was just so fun.
What about you, Ray?
Probably Ghost Story, because I feel like that episode, it feels big, and it's also spooky. It's Halloweeny, and I like Halloween. Put a Halloween episode in front of me, and I will probably love it. So, but I just think Nathan is fascinating and diabolical.
And I assume we have more Nathan to see because we got a little bit of him in the last episode. So I can only hope that he's going to appear again at some point in the near future.
Oh, yeah.
If we're staying on the topic of Halloween, we have another question from the gallery for Morgan and Ray. Are you going to dress up as your character for Halloween?
Hell yeah. You know what? Now I am. I am totally going to dress up as Mindy. And I'm going to post that shit on Instagram. And it's going to be good.
I was just I hadn't thought about it yet. But then I'm like, oh my God, yes. And oh my God, I'm going to put this on my cosplay TikTok.
Yes.
There are so many good audios I can think of to use with Gwen.
This is brilliant.
That's great.
That could be really fun.
That would be so fun.
So, for Scott and Nick, I want to ask the same question. Nick, I know you're the voice of Billy, but both of you are much more behind the scenes with this show and writing the episodes. Given the choice, I guess we do have a choice. No one's telling us what to do. Who would you dress up as for Halloween from the show?
That feels weird. That feels like wearing the
It's like dressing up as one of your kids.
Yeah.
Just one.
Yeah.
Who's your favorite child?
I dressed up as my hero. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. That feels weird.
Billy is just me at a wedding.
Yeah.
You talk like that at weddings too?
No, like the costume. It would just be like,
I was obsessed with Billy in this episode. Like, holy shit.
he had a busy day.
Yeah, the manic, like, because he's got everything under control, but it feels like he doesn't. Like, he just feels like he's right on the edge.
Yeah.
But he obviously has this big plan.
Sure. Well, everything's held on such like a house of cards right now, and Billy's just operating very recklessly. Like in the first in the first episode, we saw him like really not communicating with Charlie, and in this scene, we see him executing a plan that he's had in motion for a long time, which is putting Lorelai away, but then also having like a weird run-in with his ex. Where like, oh, I didn't know you were going to be here. I was like moving some clothes out, and like, oh, well, like, I didn't know you were still living here, you know?
Okay, so I gotta say, because that was originally in the new normal, when I first listened to Genius Boy and I heard that scene at towards the beginning, I'm like, oh shit, did I do something wrong? Did I miss something? This was not something I directed. What? It was like a minor panic attack.
That's how Marvel directors feel.
Yeah. Full credit to Chelsea Kern for directing that particular scene.
Yeah, that's true. That's fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But these things happen behind the scenes.
Yeah, it was kind of like a late in the game storytelling choice that I think flows really well. Like Scott even found there's that moment in New Normal where he's like, "Hey, sorry guys, I'm late. I was taking care of some unfinished business." In the old version, he was talking about that scene with Max. Mm-hmm. And so we just found this like, oh, it still worked. Now he was talking about the overachievers, and so it just kind of slid in really easily.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
post-production is the final draft.
Does that happen a lot? Like, do you find yourself kind of like rearranging scenes, or is it really like a challenge that comes with having sort of these 2-part scripts?
That was irregular.
No, well, yeah, it was, but I was doing it a little bit with the re-releases that we did this year, where we took everything down to 4 parts. In order to make that work, I had to rearrange some scenes sometimes, just so that certain episodes weren't so much more heavily weighted than other episodes. In terms of like time and number of scenes, so there was a little bit of rearranging that I had to do at that point.
We have another question here, I assume for Scott and Nick. Have you ever thought about doing a deleted scenes episode or a blooper reel?
I'll tell you what. I was directing Supermax the next episode, and like Ray said, there's sometimes you get these delightful bits of the actors talking to themselves. Mm-hmm. Like Naomi Wong, the whole time she records her line, she kind of stays in character as Lorelai, so she's still doing the dialect, and that's always fun to listen to her flubs because it's like listening to Lorelai. But then I always delete them to make the files shorter and easier to move around, and like I don't I don't keep the funny things. Mm-hmm. It would take a lot of effort, probably.
Yeah, we did a blooper reel on the original show. The only reason that it existed is because I didn't edit it. A listener, a brave listener to the original show, volunteered to make a blooper reel for us and painstakingly went through every single recording ever in the history of the show and created a blooper reel. And it's one of the most insane things that any listener to any podcast that I've ever been a part of has done.
So thanks, Chelsea.
But the short answer is no, that's not going to happen because who has time for that?
So before I ask for closing thoughts from anybody here, I wanted to point out 2 of my absolute favorite parts of the episode. The first one is Mindy saying that she's not wearing hockey pads, which is probably my favorite secret quote of the season from The Dark Knight. And then today I was listening to the episode for the second or third time, and the part where Max is walking away from Billy and says, "Ugh, I hate you."
Yeah.
I just like listened to that on repeat. I just did like 15 seconds back and just listened to it like 5 times. Tofty with that voice is just unbelievable.
Mm-hmm.
There is some A-grade Tofty between this episode and next week's episode.
Yes.
Next week's episode is just like it's mind-numbingly good. Tofty as Max. I mean, it's so good. I'm really excited. Yeah. There's more coming of him down the line, but there's some really good stuff next week.
So yeah, does anybody else have any closing thoughts on Genius Boy?
No, just I'm really kind of like Morgan said. I'm really proud of Mindy. Just kind of watching or listening to the kind of 2-episode arc that this has. I don't know. We had a lot of fun planning that out, and sort of the idea of her being on a different wavelength of the other team and kind of feeling some growing pains and some quarter life crisis stuff. That was really fun to write. I was really cool writing Anita Chen. I think she was terrific in this episode.
Yeah. I wanted to give a shout out to Susie, who voices Anita Chen, because she needed to be written out of the show. She needed to leave the show. She couldn't keep going on the show, and but she gave us the opportunity to write the character out rather than just having her disappear, and talk about her like off camera, be like, oh yeah, remember Anita? She left town 6 months ago. I was grateful for Susie, because Susie is a very successful professional voiceover artist now. I think she's playing like the lead in a upcoming video game or something. That's like so that. Cool. Wow. So like, yeah, so it's like she's major, and the fact that she allowed us to write her out was a big relief, and so I'm really indebted to her for allowing us to do that.
Yeah, and I'm really proud of how it turned out to like, as much as it was painful, like, or it's like seeing Anita leave the show because we had such exciting plans for her this season. Her going off on her own and doing her own thing ended up resonating with what Mindy's going through in such a cool way.
Oh yeah,
that I think just kind of, we had a lot of fun really throwing Mindy and Lorelai in particular off their axis in this episode. Lorelai obviously in a major way, but it came from a place of like, all three of us, me, Scott, and Cass, love these characters so much, and we wanted to challenge them and kind of throw them off because they're characters that are so confident, and we wanted to see them really get tested in ways that they hadn't before.
Yeah. This season is all about giving them their greatest challenge and making them really come to terms with the decisions they've made in their lives up to this point. So here's
chill episode.
Yeah, super chill. Super chill.
Hard to believe we still have 8 episodes left in this season. I feel like so much has happened in the last 2 that we get that 4 more times.
Yeah.
Just wild. All right.
I would say I really liked Simon, the robot Simon shutdown noise, Scott. I thought it was really cool.
Oh, thank you.
Sorry.
That's all right. I want to say thanks again to my guests, Scott, Nick, Morgan, Ray, for joining me today. And as always, thank you to all of you, the fans, the underdogs, for listening today. Some of you listening live, which is very cool.
Yeah.
If you'd like to support the show, please join the Dueling Genre Patreon at duelinggenre.com/support. You'll also get access to classic Geek By Night episodes, scripts, and other behind-the-scenes materials, as well as bonus content from some of your favorite Dueling Genre shows. You can also tell your friends and families and followers to subscribe to Geek By Night wherever you're listening to this right now. And stay tuned for the next episode out on November 1st, Supermax, which, surprisingly, I am just realizing now having this conversation has 2 meanings.
Yep.
And very excited for that. Thanks, everybody, for going beyond Geek By Night with us. Have a super day.